So, Michael, this reminds me of a situation of a family that we've worked with, where they understood that the care was needed.
Mm-hmm.
They were starting to get a better handle on what the cost of care was, but
Well,
they
it
had
was out of control. It was out of control. They were
control.
just spending,
And they had
$13,000 a month.
13, yeah.
And they knew they were burning through assets, and they needed to figure out a way that, how do you stabilize this and create this lifetime plan? She was young enough that, there was some longevity in this process, so we had to make sure that, what do you do?
It was her power of attorney.
Who didn't live around here?
He lived in California, right?
California.
And her aunt happened to live here in Pennsylvania, and now we had to develop this plan and get both parties together on this to make sure that they understood exactly what was the best way to
Sure.
utilize those assets.
So it starts with getting an understanding of where they are, what they want, the care needs, and figuring out what their current situation is, especially on the finance side. And we got a good understanding of what kind of guaranteed income she had coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had to look at what other assets she had that they were burning through relatively quickly to get the care that she needed. And then finding out whether it was better to stay in that situation or to move into an actual community setting. Unfortunately, the interesting part was we were actually given this referral by a community that thought that we would be able to help get them in the right direction to figure out, which is exactly what worked out.
It's very challenging when you have people in different locations.
Sure.
Right? Like everybody, you get time zones into the equation on that. So it gets very difficult. So the community wasn't able to really help and work with our client in California.
It was tough to coordinate.
Yeah,
so
it
many
was really
moving
tough to
pieces
coordinate.
because they weren't
Yeah.
right here as boots on the ground.
Yeah.
So we were able to be the liaison between the two parties, finding the right kind of community situation, identifying that the continued home situation care wasn't going to be ideal for her for the cost and the care needs, and then figuring out what those assets were, how we could stretch them to improve them better, create some income support, and even we worked and brought a team in to sell the home and significantly improved the cost or the value received on the sale of that property.
So our first strategy was to look at the assets that she currently had left in the bank that was actually being blown through because she was receiving care.
And the investments.
And the investments. And we said, okay, we need to first take some of this market volatility out of the mix. Especially what's happening in the market. She was needing care. She was going to have to ramp up her levels of care. So the first step was, let's look at this brokerage account. Let's figure out where do we put those dollars to stabilize them. And by the way, they have to be liquid. They have to be accessible. So that was step number one in the brokerage. Then step number two was looking at these assets that she had, sitting outside brokerage account savings, and now say, how do we maximize the growth on those particular, because a lot of those were sitting in accounts that were not really gaining too much interest at this point. So at that point, we took those two pieces, knowing that we had a house, like you were just talking about, that was going to be sold. Now that they had made a decision to move into a community, how do we maximize that value? Mm-hmm. And I think by bringing in a third party to show us where we could enhance the value of that house, mm-hmm. as a network partner, it's not something we do directly, we were able to go back to our client in California and show them that if they did a little bit of work for the home, they were going to substantially increase the value. Us, in return, covering the shortfall with these now 3 buckets of money, mm-hmm. and she could stay in that community for as long as never have to leave for as long as she had to leave.